Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 284 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is, "It is my responsibility." Our quote of the day comes to us from Abraham Lincoln. You cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today. I had a blast recording today's episode. I always enjoy connecting with other coaches and podcasters, and I think you will really enjoy what Jamy Bechler has to say. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Jamy, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Man, excited to be here. I appreciate you having me. It's a great podcast, and let's get after it today.
I appreciate it. So the first question I ask everybody, and I've changed this over the last probably 4 or 5 months, is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that question. That is, I think if we, sometimes we look at it and it's just such a, we want to eat this elephant, just all at the same time. And as I know, being John Maxwell mentors or being people that really love John Maxwell's work, he talks about leadership being one life influencing another. And I love that question because really it comes down to, are you going to make one step? Are you going to make, essentially get 1% better today? Are you going to take a step forward to make some little part better? And you can't do everything, but you can do something. And you can't impact everyone, but you can impact someone. So I love that question and how you start that off.
I love that answer, and I could not agree more. And I think just to follow that up is, so many people have these huge aspirations of quote unquote changing the world, and in no way do I want to demean that. But the reality is, whether it's John Maxwell, whether it's Brian Tracy, whether it's Tony Robbins, they all started one person at a time. Facebook was started with one person and then another person. So I'm glad you touched on that. So got to ask you if you have either a no-quit story of your own or perhaps a really challenging time where you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Well, since I was a college basketball coach, I've had a lot of times when I could give up or just throw my hands up in the air and say, forget this. But, you say that, and I don't know if this will help out the listeners whatsoever, but I think about it, I was coaching once, and we were in a situation where we didn't have an athletic trainer. I didn't have an assistant. I'm a college coach, but it's kind of at this little rinky-dink college. And I dislocate my ankle in practice, and there's no assistant and no trainer, and there's 15 players around me, and I dislocate my ankle, and I'm down on the ground, and literally it's out of it. It's out. My ankle's pointing in a way it's not supposed to. And it seemed like forever, but it must have been 1 second. I had this thought of, what am I going to do? I preach mental toughness all the time to my kids, and I'm always talking this big game. I'm like, what am I going to do? Because we don't have anyone. So, practice is going to have to be over if I act like a little baby. And so immediately I thought of Mel Gibson from, a movie a long, long time ago where Lethal Weapon. I'm dropping an old movie reference that people won't get, but he's put in a straitjacket and thrown underneath the water, and the only way to get out of that straitjacket, or else you'll drown, is he dislocates his own shoulder to get out. And I'm like in 1 second, I'm like, okay, I can pop this back in. If he popped it out, or if it popped out that easily, I can pop it back in. So I just popped it back in. And, those players scattered like cockroaches when you turn on the light. But that's not really a no quit story, but it was a, I'm going to push through, and I'm going to get through this, and I'm going to find a solution to this right away. And like I said, it's probably not a great story because it doesn't help your listeners necessarily. But when you're talking about no quit, when you're talking about perseverance, oftentimes you don't, and you're the expert on the no quit living, and you're the expert, on the perseverance and all that kind of stuff. That's what you talk about all the time. But, oftentimes to not quit You have to determine that you're going to keep going, and you're going to have to find a solution for something. And so in my case, even though that's kind of a dumb example, am I going to quit, go to the hospital, quit practice that day, or are we going to find a solution? And so I popped it back in, jumped right up and said, who's next in line? And it took a few minutes to get the focus back on the ladies, but I probably should have went to the hospital, but I was a tough guy. And I'll tell you what, after you do something like that, your players never question your mental toughness when you talk about mental toughness.
1 to 10, how bad was it to pop it back in?
The pain went away 100% when I popped it back in. Now, I didn't feel as much pain as you would think so, because it was one of those where, like when you trip in front of a bunch of people, your first thought is, did everybody see this? And you're embarrassed. So when I went down, yeah, there was pain, but I felt more of, what am I going to do? I'm the only one. I'm the authority here. I can't show weakness, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of layers to this psychologically that some shrink could probably take me through. But yeah, as soon as I popped it back in, I was good to go. And then that night, it was excruciating night.
Oh, I can't imagine. So I'm sure there would be some lying down on a couch with multiple doctors walking you through the mental perspective of when you dislocate an ankle, just popping it back in. So if you wouldn't mind, tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do today.
Yeah, I was a college basketball coach for about 20 years. I coached at all different levels, and I coached both men and women. I was a successful coach. I won Coach of the Year honors, set records, and I also got fired. I was also a bad coach at times. So I ran the gamut, kind of like my athletic career. I was a good athlete and I was a bad athlete at times. But I then left coaching, went to be a high school athletic director at a school that had the 5th largest gym in the country, seated over 7,000 people. It was in Indiana. We had a bunch of pro players, and nobody's won more state basketball titles than that school I was at. And after a couple years there at the high school level, I decided to jump in feet first in the deep end in doing leadership consulting. I've always had a passion for leadership and helping people grow and develop. And so we jumped right into that, got out of organized athletics, and that was about 3.5 years ago.
I love how you segued that intro into how you've won awards and things, but also then you followed up with you've also been fired as a coach. And I think there's not a lot of coaches out there that have never been fired. And the one who's most recent, I think the highest fame, is Phil Jackson. And Phil Jackson's been fired not only as a coach, but also in the front office. So I think that's the one thing that people miss a lot is they see all the wins and the victories, and using Phil Jackson as an example, they see Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Kobe Bryant, not LeBron James, Shaquille O'Neal, but it's what happens after all the glory, and it's also what happens before. So I'm really glad that you touched on that. Interesting question we ask everybody is, if you had to define yourself, but you could only use one word, what word would you pick?
That's one of the tougher questions I've gotten before. Just one word for a guy that speaks all the time. That's tough. I would probably like to go back to what I was talking about with mental toughness and say tough. Now that's kind of probably a stupid word because I don't bench press the most, and I'm not always tough, but I try to be tough in everything that I do, or probably disciplined. And I know those aren't the same, but people, I think people, when they talk to me or when they see what I do and things like that, I think they probably say, he toughs it out, he grinds it out. There's so many adjectives I want to use. There's so many things I want to be known for. That's a tough question. Thanks for stumping me.
Yeah, awesome. Have you read the book Toughness by Jay Billis?
Yeah. Great. So
I think to your point, that's one of the reasons, and I've had the honor of having Jay on the show 2 times, but the word, his book Toughness, it just epitomizes, to your point, not the who can bench press the most or who can run the fastest or who can, be the strongest in the sense of standing up to someone and challenge him in a fight or something like that. He defines it as all the other stuff. It's diving for the loose balls. It's being the first to help a teammate up. And I think that, to me, is the definition of toughness, not just, boasting and being the loudest as well.
Well, and a lot of things fall under that, the resiliency, the perseverance, your no quit living. no quit living. And I mentioned this earlier, that sometimes it's not just about, persevering through. It's making that choice that I am going to persevere, that I am going to choose to keep going. And we mentioned me getting fired, and a lot of coaches have gotten fired. Well, it wasn't a point where I got fired and it's like, okay, I'm going to quit coaching and I'm going to go sell insurance or be a real estate agent, and those are great things. But, it's not like I'm going to go do something else. My choice is, am I going to quit trying to get better, or am I going to be a victim in this and just be bitter for the next 5 years and not improve? I didn't think it was my fault when I got fired, but you know what? It was 100% my responsibility to find a way to be a better coach next time. And so, it's not always, all right, well, you're going to quit. It's like when you're running on a track, let's say you're running a mile and you got 4 laps. A lot of people quit while they're running, but you don't see them stop, but they quit. They keep running, they keep going through the motions, but they're just not getting any faster. They're not getting any better. Whereas if you're on a treadmill, you see when someone quits. I mean, the minute someone quits mentally, they go flying off the back and hit the wall or something. When I got fired, or when your ankle pops out, or when you face adversity, it's all about, all right, am I going to make a choice to keep moving forward even though this sucks? Am I going to be resilient? Am I going to be tough enough to do what I need to do to move forward? And it might take a while. And so I think that that's important to keep in mind when you talk about coaches getting fired or us facing adversity. Are we going to pop back up? And it might even be a slow pop. It might be a crawl. We don't just jump right back up, ready to go again. It might be a slow process. And so, I think that that's important, making the choice that, no, I'm not going to rebound from this immediately, but I'm going to make the choice to rebound positively.
I love that. I think that example you gave of running 4 laps around the track, I think it's something it's visually easy to see, especially with your follow-up to being on a treadmill. And I think that's really important. And there are so many people that give up, but in essence are still physically, walking or jogging around that track, but mentally, emotionally, they've already given up. They're just still continuing to move their feet. So speaking of books, I was curious if you have read anything recently, or perhaps you're reading something currently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
Yeah. Going with the toughness thing. And this is a few years old, but Living with a Seal by Jesse Itzler. And, he might be the most interesting man in the world. I don't think it's the Dos Equis guy. I think it's Jesse Itzler. I mean, he's been a rapper. He's owned a jet company, water company. He owns the Atlanta Hawks. He does all these kind of things. But he had the SEAL come in and live with him for 30 days. And I would read that every day while I'm on the stationary bike at the gym. And I'm telling you what, when you read a book like that, there's no way you can just go as slow as you did the day before. Like, you're constantly trying to break your own records when you're on the stationary bike, reading what all they went through and how tough this Navy SEAL was. And his name is David Goggins. And that would be the second book I just got that I'm reading. It's called They Can't Hurt Me, or Can't Hurt Me, David Goggins. And then if anyone, your listeners are podcast fans, I'm sure a lot of them have watched Joe Rogan, and he's been on Joe Rogan a couple times, and you just can't listen to those interviews on Joe Rogan with David Goggins and be on the couch eating potato chips.
No, and I think if you're watching or listening while you're sitting on the couch eating potatoes, you immediately get up, put them down, and start doing body squats or push-ups or something. David Goggins is one of the most intense people, and I read his book, and I've also read Jesse's book, so I appreciate you recommending those. But you yourself, I believe, are an author of 3 books?
Yeah, I've written 3 books, and 2 of them were nonfiction, and my last one that came out at Thanksgiving of 2019 was a fictional book. So a lot of your listeners are familiar with John Gordon. I know you had him on the podcast, and he it's similar to his books. In that same vein. It's fiction. It has lessons. It's a leadership fable, modern day fable. And I love John Gordon's books and those kind of books. And so I wanted to write one myself. And so we wrote one called The Bus Trip. And a lot of teams have gotten that and read through it together. And it only takes about 2 hours to read. And so, it was fun. It was fun writing that.
That's awesome. And I think the fable genre is becoming very popular, not just from from John Gordon, but there's so many amazing authors out there that are using Fables, and for those listeners maybe not very familiar, it's a mix between a fiction and nonfiction, but it has a lesson or lessons weaved within it. So I'm really glad that you touched on that. Before we jumped on today, I was talking to you about the idea of mastermind, and I was curious, have you ever been involved in a mastermind, or is it something that you would recommend to possibly our listeners finding out more about?
Yeah, I would. I've never been involved in a long-term mastermind. Going through the John Maxwell training, I was trained as a leadership coach, similar to you, as you were as well. And that's a big emphasis in the John Maxwell training is masterminds. So I feel like I've been through a lot of masterminds, but never an actual long-term formalized group. I've had some accountability groups, but never a mastermind. But yeah, definitely love the concepts, definitely see the benefit of those. I can't speak highly enough of those without me actually having been a part of one formally before.
You said accountability groups. That's like one of the most important things that I love to talk about is accountability. So going to lead up to a question is, which I ask most people, is how do you personally define accountability, or what does accountability mean to you?
A couple things, but first of all, is doing what you say you're going to do, or doing what you're supposed to do. And those are two slightly different things. But yeah, doing what you say you're going to do. And, if you have goals, or if you tell your wife you're going to do something, or you tell your kid you're going to do something, and then you don't do it, then that's not responsible. But then when they hold you accountable, a lot of times when people hold you accountable for that stuff, you get defensive, or we get defensive, or we come up with excuses or rationale as to why we didn't do that, why I didn't take my son to the movies or to the park or watch, TV with him when I said I would. And he doesn't care, what my excuse was. And so we have to be accountable to other people, but accountable to ourselves. If we're any kind of competitor, or someone that wants to be a champion, or someone that wants to be as successful as possible, then there's going to be times when it's just about us. It's just self-accountability. And, people don't know what I'm doing. I mean, nobody knows what I'm doing in my office today. Nobody I don't have a boss, not even my wife. Like, there's not this boss that's going down a checklist saying, all right, you got these 4 things done today, and holding me accountable to that. But I'm self-accountable to those things. If I don't get those things done, then they have to go tomorrow. And in the world of entrepreneurship, I think I said that right. I'm terrible with that word. But when you're in business for yourself, if I'm not working today, or not doing what I need to do today, not only am I not really making money today, but I'm not making money sometime in the future as well. And so at some point, the saying goes, the best time to fix a roof is when it's sunny outside. At some point, we've got to hold ourselves accountable and be doing things all the time that are taking us toward our goals. And oftentimes that's just self-accountability and making sure that what we want most is more important than what we want right now.
I love that. I think I've heard that example you gave about the best time to fix a roof is when it's sunny out. And I think you saw me smile, and I think the reality is that's 100% true. The second best time would be, before the roof breaks or something like that. But the reality is we all typically fix that roof a week, 2 weeks after we've had that first drizzle or first rain, and all of a sudden you see the water coming in, and it's like, all right, I should probably do that. It's like the second step to that is, okay, I should probably do that right now, and I should do it before it becomes a problem. And I love how you talked about self-accountability, because I think that is something that is really a part of accountability, and it's a topic that obviously I talk about all the time. But before you can be accountable to somebody else, or before you can be truly accountable to somebody else, you got to be accountable to yourself. And in reality, there's a correlation. If you're not accountable to yourself and you're not self-accountable, the likelihood that you're going to be accountable to somebody else is slim to none. And even if you are, it's probably not going to last long.
Yeah, and I think most of us, and I'm not a psychologist, so I don't have the studies on this, but I think most of us truly know, it's hard for us to lie to ourselves at the end of the day. Like, we know if we're lazy, or we know if we didn't do what we were supposed to do, or we know if we kind of fudged on something or whatever. Now, we might pass it off as we don't know, or, and I think of, and this isn't maybe applicable to everybody in your audience, but I know when you got a player that says, I have no idea why coach isn't playing me. And I'm like, BS. You actually do know why. You just don't want to admit it to whoever you're talking to. Like deep down, you actually know why. Now you might not agree with the reason, but you know why coach isn't playing you, or you know why a result happened. You just may not want to fix it. You might not agree with it. You might not agree that's the path. Might not want to admit it. I think very few of us have just complete blinders on, and we have zero clue. I think most of us know deep down. We just choose to come up with some other excuse, because rationalizing and excuse making is a lot easier.
It's funny that you talk about that. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Dr. Robert Gilbert. He has what's called the Success Hotline. It's a daily recorded message you can call. It's a number actually in Jersey, so it doesn't cost anybody. But he's a sports psychologist. He's been doing this for over 10,000 episodes, and he talked today about giving an example. And the best athletes, he always said, want the truth. And I think that goes to the next step, or it goes back to what you just said in regards to, we all know that player knows why he's not playing. There's not a lot of players sitting on the bench and all of a sudden, like, I have no idea. Is it because I'm too short, too tall, too fast? I don't play defense. Most people know, and it doesn't mean within seconds of playing on a team or something like that, but as practice goes on and you have a game or two, you'll see. And the other perspective, and the reason why I shared that story about Dr. Robert Gilbert, is go ahead and ask a question. Like I said, when he said this morning, is the best players, they want to know the truth. So maybe for any of our listeners, if you're not getting that opportunity in school or in a sports team or in a business opportunity, instead of sitting back and just taking it or thinking it as is, go ahead and ask that question. Go ahead and ask, hey, you know what, Jamy, why am I not getting any playing time? I'd love to, get some playing time. Is there something that I'm doing or not doing? And I think that's when you have some of the most real conversations, not only with yourself, but also with others on your team or corporation.
Yeah, and too many of us, going back to finding solutions we were talking about earlier about not quitting or persevering, oftentimes it's just finding solutions. Or, I mentioned it earlier, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. Well, it might not be your fault, but it's 100% your responsibility to try to find a way out of this or to find a solution. And I had the amazing good fortune to do some leadership training with the Toronto Raptors a couple years ago, and it came to mind while you were talking because Dwayne Casey was the head coach, and he got fired after that year, but he won Coach of the Year honors. He was the NBA Coach of the Year and got fired after that year. Well, going into that year, the general manager had said that they needed a culture reset. They needed to do some things differently. And Coach Casey reached out to me, and that was an amazing thing to me to see this guy who's making a ton of money, he's been a successful coach, to say, you know what, it may not be my fault. I might not agree with my boss, but I'm going to do what I can. And so I'm going to bring this guy in to talk with our coaching staff, to work with our players and that kind of stuff. And when I started working with the Raptors, I started to see an atmosphere, an environment of coachability. The coaches were coachable. The players were coachable. They had a great culture there. And that was one of the reasons they were so good and they won a championship a year later, was because there wasn't a lot of ego there, even with the coaches. So you got this Dwayne Casey, Coach of the Year, and he's very coachable. He wants to get better. And I was amazed. I mean, the first hour I am there meeting with the coaches, he's asking me questions, and I'm like, asking me questions about his team. And I'm like, dude, you're the big time coach here. I just got here. But he wanted to learn. He wanted to find ways to make the program better. And I use that example, but I see that all the time. And the best people, the most successful people, whether you're in business, athletics, it doesn't matter, are you coachable, and do you want to keep getting better? Or are you going to be arrogant? Are you going to be playing the blame game? And that doesn't make things better. Now, did Coach Casey get fired after that year? Yes, he did. But you know what? He kept his integrity. He did things the right way, and he helped lay a blueprint for them to win a world championship the next year.
I love that. And that word culture is something that it's not just sports teams, it's businesses, it's families, it's charities, it's different boards for nonprofits and well as for profits. And I think the culture of all those things is so important. And I'm really glad you touched on it. If you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself just one piece of advice, what would that be?
Without a doubt, don't be dead right. And what I mean by that, don't be dead right. Don't be arrogant. And we oftentimes are the smartest person in the room. We're oftentimes more knowledgeable than somebody else. We're more intelligent, especially in our area, especially as a coach. I'm the smartest person in the locker room. I'm the smartest person in the gym. Okay. But that doesn't mean that what I say or what I do is gonna get the best result. I might be right, but I might be dead right. People might not follow me. I might not inspire people. I might turn people off with my arrogance and that kind of stuff. And there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge, I love the saying, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. Too often times as business people, as fathers, as husbands, as coaches, whatever it is, man, we are right. This is the way we should go, or this is the thing that we should do, but we don't go about it the right way. We turn people off. We're the know-it-all. Maybe we don't look at other options. Maybe we don't have to be right now. It's not about me being right. It's about us being right and us getting where we need to go. And without a doubt, that would have been the number one thing.
I love that. I think that's great advice. And I've never heard that tomato story, so I might have to copy that. If I could have the opportunity to grant you dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would you pick?
That is awesome. I would love to sit down with Martin Luther King. I know that sounds like an easy answer, or one of those Sunday school answers. But I'm amazed at the way he wasn't perfect. He had flaws like all of us have flaws, but the way he was able to inspire so many people and get so much accomplished through nonviolent means and through, all right, I'm going to get arrested, but I'm not going to act a fool. I'm not going to make it about, I'm not going to lose focus on what our focus is. I'm not going to lose sight of what our real goal is, and just the strength that it took to live a life like that. And I'd love to just pick his brain a little bit, because I mean, if someone pushes me, I want to push them back. If someone trolls me online or on Twitter, I mean, my first instinct is to defend myself. And he constantly was taking the higher road, and it paid off. It certainly didn't pay off perfectly, but it paid off with a lot of laws and a lot of change. And I would just love to talk to him about that stuff.
He's an incredible person. So, switching gears to what we call our hot seat questions, and the only request we ask of you is you spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
All right.
If you could pick anything at all for your last meal, what would you pick?
SpaghettiOs and chicken nuggets.
Nice. Favorite smell?
That's actually in my will, by the way. So
really?
that was an easy question. Yeah. I want
awesome.
SpaghettiOs and chicken nuggets served at my funeral.
That is awesome. I hope you don't die at any point soon, but if you do before me, I definitely want to come to your funeral. Favorite smell?
Peppermint.
Favorite sport?
Golf.
All-time favorite team?
Michigan Wolverines.
Favorite movie?
Dumb and Dumber.
Great movie. Do you have an all-time favorite quote?
Probably my favorite quote is just "Success is a choice."
I love that quote. Do you have an all-time favorite book?
Yeah, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Great book. Favorite group, singer, or band?
Toby Mac.
And if you were stuck in a foxhole and you could only pick one person to have your back, who would you pick?
We'll go with David Goggins. We were talking about him earlier. That was the first thing that...
I was just about to say, I knew you were going to say Goggins. So what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you or follow you, as well as get a copy of your book and find out more about the 3 books you do have?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter way more than I should be. I am definitely a twit, And but they can follow me at Coach Bechler, and it looks like Bechler, but Coach Bechler at Coach Bechler on Twitter, and they can find my podcast, they can find my books, they can find my website, all at that Twitter account.
Awesome. And then last question we ask everybody is if you have some parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
Oh yeah, lots of parting words, but I would encourage people, and I know that this is tough in our current environment, culture, society, whatever, but whether you're a coach, a business person, a family man, it doesn't matter. Try to see other people's perspectives. Try to understand where other people are coming from. It doesn't mean you're right. It doesn't mean they're wrong, but try to see other people's perspectives, because going back to your very first question about positively impacting just one person, we don't make change. Most of us will never make change by getting this whole group of people to come on board with us. It's one person at a time. And if you don't see the other person, if you're not understanding them, if you're only wanting to be understood, then you're never going to be able to get one person to come to your side or to see your argument if you can't see theirs.
I love that. I think that's a beautiful way to end today's episode. So, Jamy, I truly appreciate your time, and I know that you and I will connect soon, and I hope that our listeners follow you more and find out more about your books, as well as spending way too much time on Twitter.
I appreciate it, Chris. Keep up the good work you're doing as well.
Thank you for listening to episode number 284. Jamy said something today that I have not heard before. To not quit, you have to determine to keep going. I love that. As a former college basketball coach, Jamy spoke about winning awards and in turn also getting fired. And I appreciate his candor, but something he mentioned really stood out. It might not be my fault, but it is my responsibility. There's a lot of power in that statement. I challenge you today as you move on with your day to accept responsibility. It won't be easy or won't be simple, but it is possible. And remember, we rise by lifting others up.
And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.